Now available in paperback and e-readers. John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s in this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Get your copy of John Haynes, 1987 in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Many executives in Hollywood thought that streaming was going to be the next big thing. Now, many of these executives at Disney, Viacom, CBS, and Warner Brothers thought that they would be able to reap larger profits than Netflix if they went out here and produced their own content on their own streaming services. Now, many of these executives, as they were out here, saw the success of Netflix as related to streaming and saw all of the money they were making as related to their platform. And what they wanted to do was go out here and create competing platforms to go out here and try to reap some of those profits. Unfortunately, those executives really didn't have a good understanding of the business model of Netflix, and what made Netflix profitable was overall content, and the fact that the content that they had was motivating people to go out here and pay for the subscriptions. Now, Netflix made a lot of money, not just on their original content like Luke Cage and many of their movies, but they made a lot of money because it was a place people could go to see other content from other providers such as Sony, Viacom, CBS, and Warner Brothers, and because they could go see all of that content on one platform for a low price, that was one of the motivating things for people to have a Netflix account. And this is where many of the executives really got things twisted, because they thought that they could go out here and make subscriptions by selling their own content on their own platforms like Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, and HBO Max. And they thought that since they were going to be able to have their own platforms, people would go pay money to see their content on their platforms. Unfortunately, many of these executives really didn't understand how they were actually taking money out of their own pocket, because Netflix was actually paying these studios to use their content, and the money that they were getting from Netflix was actually bringing profits to them, similar to the way other local channels were paying the studios for much of the content that is broadcast in syndication. Now, with the Telecom Act of 1996, the syndication market basically was gutted because many of the studios owned many of the small local channels, and they would broadcast their own content on the small local channels. And this got worse as TV went digital in 2009. And as TV went digital in 2009, they created a lot of sub-channels, and these sub-channels would go out here and broadcast a lot of the older shows that they had in syndication. So many of the big studios like Viacom, CBS, Warner Brothers, Disney, and Fox basically lost a major revenue stream as related to syndication, and they further cut themselves off at the knees as related to creating a revenue stream as related to Netflix. Now, Netflix was basically like a syndicator, a platform that was paying many of these studios for their own movies and TV shows and providing them with a platform to show these movies and TV shows. And as they were going out here getting the subscriptions and making the money on the subscriptions, the content was paying all of the syndication fees right back to the studios. And again, because the studios wound up getting greedy as related to streaming, they were thinking about getting people to pay for subscriptions, not understanding they were making more money on just selling content. And that was where they made their big mistake as related to streaming, because one streaming service paying you, a studio, lots of money for content is bringing money into that studio to fund a lot of projects. But when you've got big budget movies like The Flash and the MCU that you're financing, and you're trying to also finance a streaming service at a price of about $7 or $8 a customer in the case of Disney Plus, or in the case of HBO Max $14.99, this is going to affect your bottom line because now you're not paying somebody for content. Now you're paying to produce both content for the theaters and the streaming service, and you're making twice as many productions, and this is where the studios wind up in a financial jam because you're paying to create content not only for the theaters, television, and now streaming, you're also having to pay for trying to maintain the servers as related to the streaming service that you have. So you're basically adding more and more costs to your business, and these were costs that you didn't have when Netflix was doing this, because all you were doing was paying Netflix to go out here and take your content, put it on their servers, and you were basically going out here getting money from Netflix. And again, Netflix was paying you to go do this, and again, they were paying you to do this, and now you're paying to maintain all of this in addition to making all of these productions. So this is a major loss for the studios, and this is why the studios are losing $1 billion every year. The studios are basically losing $1 billion every year because now they have compounded their costs as related to the streaming services, the TV networks, and their movies that they're producing. So they're producing 3 times as much content, and they're only getting 2 revenue streams as related to it. So before, again, Netflix was paying them for the rights to streaming, so you had a revenue stream coming in. You had revenue coming in from the movies at the box office, and you had revenue coming in from the ads on television, but you wind up cutting off a lot of your money because now customers are not waiting for TV shows anymore in reruns or even waiting for the TV shows now, because now most people are waiting for streaming, and again, they'll sit there and wait for streaming, and that cuts much of your box office and undercuts your movies at the box office. It also undercuts much of your TV shows as related to ad dollars because people will wait for streaming, and it undercuts your money as related to the streaming services themselves because they are encroaching on each other. And this is the disaster that has happened as related to Hollywood that has them in a bind. They thought that streaming was going to be the next big thing for them, like cable TV, where people felt like they had to go out here and watch cable and pay for cable in order to watch certain shows. But with the advent of pirated websites, people will wait for these shows to go to a pirated website rather than pay them. And again, it looks like Hollywood has basically been beaten at its own game because they just got too greedy. Now, Hollywood, as I see it, really got too greedy as related to its overall quest to make money. And as they got obsessed with making money, they wound up costing themselves money because now you're paying for all of these servers, you're paying for twice as much content, and sadly you're rushing out a lot of poor quality content like She-Hulk and many of the Paramount Plus shows and many of the Netflix shows, which have poor production values. And they have poor production values because you're rushing out content and not focusing on the quality of the content. You're just trying to put out a quantity of it in order to try to make the streaming service profitable. And this is where streaming has basically broken the back of Hollywood and has led to Hollywood basically winding up at where it's teetering and tottering on collapse because the studios just can't afford to continue sustaining this business model. It would have been cheaper for them to just go out here and pay and have Netflix pay them, because you're already going to be able to run your movies in the theater. And as you run your movies in the theater and people don't know when they're coming to Netflix, you will have people who will be out here looking to go see these movies at the theater. And with TV shows, you'll have people having to go and have to watch these shows. If they say that they're waiting for streaming, they don't know when the show is coming to streaming. And again, you're the one going to be making the money because Netflix is paying you. But sadly, these guys got greedy, and as they got greedy, they forgot something I learned a long time ago about television, and that if you slice the pie too thin, nobody can get a taste of the pie, and nobody has an incentive to go out here and buy the pie because they can't taste the flavors of the pie. Now, back in the early 80s, there were only 3 television networks, and in the 50s there were 4 because Dumont came out, and then Dumont came and went, but we only had 3. We had ABC, CBS, and NBC, and a couple of local syndicated channels, and PBS. So the slices of the pie were about 3 big slices and a couple of small ones, but the whole thing is everybody got a taste of content, and as Fox came along in 86 or 87, the pie got cut into maybe 6 or 7 pieces, but when UPN and WB and the 500 cable channels came along, it became hard to watch all of this content because there were just too many channels to choose from. And that got worse in 2009 when TV went digital and we got even more channels. And now that we've got streaming, we've got even more streaming channels. So there's so much content that's saturating the market that there's no way for a human being to watch it all. And it just is overwhelming. And again, this is hurting the entire business of Hollywood because streaming just isn't making the revenue come in fast as they're spending it. And they're spending a lot of money these days because of the tunnel vision they have on superhero movies. And because they have tunnel vision on superhero movies, they're so focused on spending hundreds of millions of dollars on these movies, and they're trying to spend billions of dollars trying to build the streaming infrastructure. So something has to give, and sadly, streaming may be the beginning of the end of these platforms because these big media companies, they're just spending too much money, even worse than they did during the last days of MGM in the late 60s and the days that basically put Warner Brothers and other studios on the brink of bankruptcy. They're spending so much money that is more money being spent than coming in, and sadly a lot of it is being spent on projects made by people called social justice warriors and so-called activist writers who are not about producing entertainment and not understanding that on the internet content is king, and if your content isn't strong, you're not going to be able to survive. And again, on the internet, if your content isn't strong, you're not going to be able to keep the viewers. And that is something that many of the media executives don't really understand about the whole business of entertainment. When you have content that isn't very good, you're not going to be able to get people to pay for it, especially when they can go to get a pirated website, or they can go out here and see better content for free on platforms like Tubi. A lot of these streaming services, again, they're suffering because there just is no leadership that understands how the internet works. And again, on the internet, content is king, and it's about the quality of the content, not the quantity. You have to continue to produce high quality content over a period of time if you want to maintain your viewers and maintain your audience. You have to go out here and make quality content, and that's something many of the executives in Hollywood don't understand. They're looking to make a fast dollar, but when it comes to the internet, money isn't made fast. No, internet money is made very slow, and this is something I've understood as being a print-on-demand publisher for many years. It's a very slow process, and you have to really take your time about it. And this is something Hollywood doesn't have because a lot of these executives are impatient. And what they don't understand is they're going to spend themselves into oblivion because they don't understand that with the streaming, again, you've got a fragmented pie that's split too thin. You're spending more than that's coming in. and you're just making a lot of projects nobody cares about. And again, this is what's leading to the just downfall of Hollywood. They came into streaming thinking about the money, but not thinking about the quality of the content they were producing for their audiences. Now, if you want to pick up some of my content on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, and my sorority novel, The Thetas, or my business novel, Recipe for Success, and my vampire novel, Eternal Night, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can send a donation to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.